Welcome, everyone. You are listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lori Lee Benstock, host of a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network and anywhere you get your podcasts. Today's guest is Dr. Layla Salek. After a 20-year career in private practice focused on behavioral psychology, she has released a powerful memoir highlighting her traumatic childhood. Chaos in Color is the captivating story of Layla's journey from childhood to adulthood with a mother who suffered from untreated bipolar disorder and wants to stress, above all, that in order to heal, we must forgive. Layla is a synesthesia. I don't think I got that right, but I'll have Layla correct me, meaning she sees people in color. Having this rare ability offered her a rare and often beautiful view of people and the world that inspired her book. Layla, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, can you correct me? Because I know I didn't say that word correctly.
Well, it's synesthesia, but it's funny
Synesthesia.
because I didn't know that word, for most of my life, but yes, it's synesthesia.
Awesome. But this is something that you've actually had, being able to see people in color. I would just, am I just guessing here? Or is this like you're able to see people's aura and their energy?
I assume, I don't know. It's something that I've been able to do since I was little, and I had no idea other people couldn't. I don't see everybody in a color. Actually, it's very few people. It's not, there's no real rhyme or reason to who, I see in color. Some of my favorite people, I don't. Most people, I just kind of see like a little white light outline around them. Um, and, once again, I didn't know that word until I was older and in grad school. Didn't even know that other people couldn't do it until I was in grad school, which was quite funny.
That is so fascinating. Yeah, because I feel like that when I think of like some movies, I don't know anyone who personally, but what I've seen in movies, people can see, I guess they would call them their aura. So I didn't know if
Mhm.
that and whatever energy they're giving off, because I guess energy has different colors.
Well, it
Um,
definitely, my mom was bipolar, beautiful, beautiful woman. And if she was manic, she appeared very black. And
mm,
if she was fine and healthy and doing really well, she was this beautiful, like golden brown. So I do know whatever it is I'm seeing does change based on mood or health or energy, whatever's occurring with them.
that is so fascinating. Well, Chaos in Color. Can you tell me a little bit about your book? And I'm assuming all the being able to see people in color, like I said, inspired the book as well.
Yes, so it's about my life from birth until in my 50s, until 50. And it's basically my journey growing up with a mom that was untreated, severe bipolar, single mom, no money, and really what that experience was like. And not just, suffering trauma and abuse from a mother who couldn't help it because she wasn't treated, but also from our mental health system and from our school system and what all of that looked like. So I'm pretty explicit when I write, and I fought for my style of writing with my publisher. But I wanted people to feel like they were there with me. So, I get a lot of comments about how it's a hard read, and I feel like I was there with you, and but I wanted people to have that experience.
Wow. Wow. I mean, you I actually was diagnosed bipolar about uh, 15 years ago, I want to say
Mhm.
now. And then it ended up being PTSD. But at that time they didn't really know. And I've spoken to people and who have children or who were children of people they believe were diagnosed with bipolar. And it is very difficult, and honestly, there were times where I was like, "Am I doing this to my children? What how am I affecting my children with this behavior?" Um, and obviously, not within their control, especially if they don't have the support that they
Right.
need or diagnosis. But how did that affect you growing up and into adulthood, really?
Yeah, I mean, I write explicitly about long periods of time by myself in a trailer where it was just me, a little kid. Um, it was scary at times. It was incredibly lonely at times. It was fun at times. Um, I did what any child would do in many instances. I skipped school. I didn't go to school when I was supposed to and failed the eighth grade. I played and, you know, um, I would gravitate towards people that would take me in and that I could go live with for bits of time. And thank God that, so many of them were angels that did take me in from a very young age. And, they're still my family today. And that's just amazing. Um, but it was, it's scary because a child doesn't know what's going on, and when you hit typical teenager, I hated her. I didn't realize that what she was experiencing was something she could not help. um and just it being she and I was the brunt of everything. Took on everything. um if she was depressed, she wouldn't get out of bed for long periods of time, weeks on end. If she was manic, she would be gone and wouldn't come home for long periods of time. And then, she would come home from being manic and would crash again in the bed and was suicidal and had suicidal ideations. And we would get her to a publicly funded mental health clinic called MHMRA. And the psychiatrist would give her Valium, which was just something I never understood, even as a child. Why would you give Valium to someone that can't get out of bed?
Yeah.
And then she would either constantly talk about wanting to die or she would attempt suicide. And that was also something I couldn't understand. Like, why wouldn't she want to stay around for me? Why would she do this to herself and me? Um, and then I would go to other places. Like, I didn't want to come home and she was dead. And what would I do? Um,
Mm.
and so I write, when you're reading this book, you're in the trailer with me navigating what do I do with this lady? Like, how do I deal with this? Um, and it has had far reaching effects into my adulthood. It chose my career path for me. I, for many years, worked with kids that, had severe behavior disorders, from any type of behavior disorder, from mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenia, or, even to just developmental disorders like autism. But I always felt like with each child that I was helping, that I was, saving their future and their future children. And, on some level, kind of, saving my mom. So it's had far reaching effects.
Wow, wow. When did you realize that needed to heal, that there was something that you needed to do for yourself?
So after I had my daughter, which I write about in Chaos and Color, I went through extreme social anxiety. Extreme. I could not leave the house. I could not leave her. Some women have postpartum depression where they don't want to be around the child and, they feel like they're going to hurt them. I had the opposite. Like,
Mm.
I wouldn't leave her and I felt like a lioness, that I didn't want anybody around her or touching her, or, and it was like for the first time I had something to lose, that was mine. And I did not want to leave. And when I would leave the house, I'd get all geared up to leave the house. And when I would leave the house, a million things would go through my mind, like a million horrific things that could happen to my daughter or happen to me. And then I would immediately go back home. And it was debilitating for years. And finally, I just, I deal with behavior disorders. And so I finally went, okay, I'm going to treat myself like my client, and I'm going to write a behavior plan for, social anxiety, and I'm going to follow it no matter what. I'm not going to listen to my thoughts. I'm just not going to listen to my thoughts. I'm going to follow it. And I ended up getting myself out of it. But I realized that that was the start of a lot of trauma that I had stored that I hadn't dealt with coming out in these inappropriate ways. Um, and I have a saying that any client that's been around me, or friends or family, that what you resist persists. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to go in there like a little shovel, a little excavation, you know, experience here. And you have to go in there and dig all that up. And you have to feel those emotions and you have to experience it. And you have to walk the walk that is super hard to do. You have to feel that pain. You have to look it in the eyes. Um, and you have to experience your experience so that it'll go away, so you can actually release it. And but that at that age, I had her when I was 30. And so that started a very long journey of healing, that really culminated and was released with my memoir. And I felt like, 100 pounds was released off of me when I finished the memoir.
Wow. Wow. And I feel like a lot of times, our children either give us the strength to heal
Mhm,
or really show us what is going on. And, some people it's really difficult to face.
mhm.
Um, but what did you do? Were there any methods that you used for to start the healing process?
Well, I mean, it started with the social anxiety and me, I mean, it was desensitization is what I had to use at first. Just, I know you don't want to be in this setting, but you have to stay here for 5 minutes, or you have to stay here for 10 minutes and then 20 minutes. And, so it really started with just desensitization and learning something that has really helped me for so long now is your thoughts are not real
Mhm.
and your thoughts are lying to you. And that's huge. And you're not your thoughts. Your thoughts are happening to you. Um, and as I got older, and I started writing my memoir in 2018.
Mm.
Um, Thankfully, I discovered Eckhart Tolle, and he does a brilliant job of teaching people how to get in the present moment, get out of the past, get out of the future, what's going on with your thoughts. You're only actually living in the present moment. Um, and he has been incredibly healing. Now I'm getting a certification in his whole school and philosophy. Um, but the biggest thing is getting out of your head. Our
Right.
thoughts are not our friends, and it can lead us down a really scary rabbit hole
Yeah.
where you're just really not in reality.
Yeah. I've spoken to a lot of trauma survivors who are thriving, and it was the awareness and being present has I mean, there are many different ways other people have gotten to that point, but that's always been the key that if I could
Yes.
like weave a thread through like
Yep.
everyone's journey, but just staying present and being aware. And we know that that can be very, very difficult.
Yep.
But once you're able to get to that point, which there's so many modalities to get there,
Mhm,
um, it is transformational. I
mhm,
talk a lot about forgiveness.
mhm.
Um, can you explain? Because I know that forgiveness it can be for a lot of people. I've spoken to a lot of sexual assault survivors, and they're gung ho on like I why do I have to forgive this person? Um, and every year there's the day of forgiveness that I post on social media, and there's always someone
Okay.
who's just like, so I,
Mhm,
at least a while back, but recently I mean, I think forgiveness, I feel like forgiveness means different things for different people. But can you explain your idea of forgiveness
mhm.
and the importance of it
Yeah.
for
So
healing?
I find it, first of all, I'm with you whenever you say, on the day of forgiveness, you post and you always get pushback. Um, Most of my interviews that I go on, especially the ones that are live, on these morning shows, they always very quickly want to know my 5 steps to healing and forgiveness. And whenever it gets to my third step of forgiveness, it's like I get the biggest pushback. Um, So let's go into that. I truly believe that forgiveness is a daily practice, and I believe that it's your responsibility. Um, if you don't forgive, you freeze yourself and that person in that very day that the trauma occurred. You don't ever get out of that. You stay there. You carry it with you. You store it. Um, it's like, and every time that you choose not to forgive somebody, you're storing that as well. So you're constantly just storing all this trauma, all this hurt, all this pain on you all the time. And the only way to get past your trauma is to take a look at it, feel those emotions, and let it go. And how do you let that go? You let it go by feeling it. You let it go by calling it by its right name. What was your responsibility in the situation? What was their responsibility in the situation? Looking at it very, very clearly, forgiving yourself, forgiving them, and moving on and letting it go. But that's for you. I also find, which is where people have the hard time, is that I find that forgiveness is also for them. And I do think that it's a compassionate, kind thing to do for them as well. Um, hurt people hurt people. They don't want to. They
Yeah.
don't. This is not something that they came into this world as a kid going, I'm going to hurt everybody that I can possibly hurt. But they didn't do that.
Yeah.
And they're hurting so much more on the inside than they ever hurt you. It just spilled over onto you. And to me, the people that hurt the most are the ones that need the most understanding, the most love, the most kindness, the most forgiveness. And why is that? Because I don't want them going and hurting somebody the way they hurt me. And if you don't forgive and you constantly hold that against them, that's adding to their shame, their guilt, their trauma, and they're going to turn around and do it again. If they can actually experience someone's compassion and love and forgiveness, you're going to take away a little bit of their hurt. And maybe they might think next time, this
Mm.
person is a feeling person. This person's a compassionate person. This person's a loving person. Maybe not hurt. Maybe look at myself and figure out why I'm hurting. You know, a lot of people that hurt, you know, you talked about the awareness, they don't have that awareness. And so I think that it's our responsibility to help not only ourselves move on so we're not stuck there, but help them not hurt anybody anymore. And I know that's hard. I know it's hard. I have a saying that we should forgive everybody for everything all the time. And probably there's been 1,000 people that probably want to slap me for that. But I write very explicitly in my memoir so that you're in the trauma with me, you're in the abuse with me, you're in the neglect with me. So at the end, when you see that I forgave and healed, that I healed and forgave, I want you to do the same.
How did you get to that point?
Um, I got to it realizing that she couldn't help it.
Mm.
And she was not hurting me on purpose. She was just hurting. She was just
Right.
hurting. And I
Yeah.
just happened to be the one closest to her.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a childhood sexual abuse survivor. I was abused by my father. And I held on to a lot of hate, a lot of anger for so long. Um, I did a psychedelic assisted therapy
Mhm.
journey. And it was then when I realized that I had compassion for my father's younger self and
Yep.
understood that he was abused and understood that he didn't know better. Even though for years I would just say, of course he knew better. Of course
Right.
he's an adult. He should know
Yeah.
better. But the reality that I was feeling in that moment was that he didn't because he knew. And that was transformational for me. So for me, I didn't feel that I needed to necessarily go to him and forgive him,
Yes. Good. Uh-huh.
but I did feel that I had compassion for him and I had this understanding that what he did was not to hurt me. And then I had to do a lot of forgiving myself for blaming myself for a lot of it.
Yeah,
Um,
for for certain. And I'm with you when you say you had to look at the child in him. That helped me a lot as well. And on purpose, in my memoir, I started with my mom's childhood. I wanted
mm,
people to see um, where she came from, and I wanted people to start the memoir with empathy for her before
yeah.
they saw what she did to me. So I
Wow.
wanted them to see that. Um, and I really did get to a place where I was like, she really didn't have a chance. She had zero chance,
Mm,
especially not having any money, no education, no family, nothing. She had zero chance of being able to deal with being bipolar, being abused herself, starved herself, um, beaten, almost killed by one of her sisters because they didn't have enough food. So they were going to kill her because she was one of the littler ones.
oh my
um,
God.
you know, I wanted the reader to start off with that empathy. I didn't want them to start off with what I experienced and then they stay mad at her. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that
Yeah.
is a good, I love that you're telling your experience of that to people, that you went back to the child, your father as a child, because this does start somewhere.
Right.
It
Right.
didn't just start with him as a little kid going, "This is what I'm going to do when I'm a dad." He didn't do that.
Right. Right.
you
Right.
know, and and I hope that when you went through that process of healing, that you saw how much better you felt about yourself,
Mm,
how you could release the whole situation, how
yes.
differently you felt about him, and then you've probably even noticed what a different mom you are now.
Yes. And it really did show me what I noticed after is how I also treated people. I wasn't as reactive
Yeah,
to people when I would get angry because I was that all that pain that I was holding onto for so long just accumulated in anger, right? And so it was spilling, like you were saying, it just spills out onto other people. And like I was just it spilled out in road rage, it would spill out in me yelling at my children all the time. It was not good for me. But when this happened, it was like a switch. It was complete everything was different.
hmm
It was like you were talking about, the weight was just lifted. It was completely it was just I was able to not feel so bogged down and overwhelmed by just life itself, because that was what was holding me back, I felt like.
And then I want you to a second go back to the person that you were saying you were, which is on a way lesser scale than you and I experienced as children. But go back to, you were saying that you're yelling at people and you have road rage and you're doing this. You want people to understand you. You want people to forgive you for that. You want people to have compassion for what you did. You didn't sit
Mhm.
here and go, I'm going to wake up this morning and scream at everybody and hate
Right,
everybody and do that. And you so hope that people go, there's something going on. She's
right.
hurting. So
And
that is
yeah.
kind of the way that I feel about it. I think we all need to take a moment and say, we haven't had good behavior ourselves. We haven't treated everybody amazing all the time. Obviously, what you and I experience is on a really extreme level, and I hope nobody ever has to experience it. But forgiveness is for us. It is for yourself,
Mhm.
but it is also for them as well. I don't believe that you can really release it and no longer carry it unless you do get to that compassion on some level.
I agree. I do agree with that. I didn't know. I thought I would never forgive my father. I thought, like,
Me
I would
too.
hate him forever. Um, I don't care to spend my time with him, but I'm able I can do things for me, right? Like I couldn't do before.
Right.
And like you were saying, on those days when I had those bad days where I'm just going off on random strangers, um there were times people were like, "Okay, are you okay?" Okay.
Mhm.
Like, step back, I'm like, "Whoa, what's going on with me?" Or there were
Right.
times where people would yell right back at me and give me the finger, and
Right.
then I'd get even more angry. So it's like this, it's like the anger would just develop. So I do appreciate what you're saying is, if you're able to be give someone a little compassion and understand that they are going through some stuff, um,
Yeah.
that can cause a switch in them.
And I don't believe that you have to be around that person anymore. I don't feel that way.
Mhm.
Um, I hope that we don't leave anybody behind, that we do try to help as much as we can. I do believe God puts people in our orbit for a reason. Um, but, as Eckhart talks about, we are all energy and it is a vibration. If your vibration changes from anger to love and release and compassion, they feel that. And it doesn't mean that you have to be right beside them, you know, and you have to do every little thing for them and totally act like nothing ever happened. And, I'm not a firm believer of that. I just do believe we are energy and we are vibrations. And um, I just don't want people missing the beauty and the release and the healing because they are afraid to forgive or too angry to forgive.
Right.
Because that fear and that anger is what's keeping you from healing.
Oh my goodness, exactly. Oh, yeah. What when you decided to forgive, did you have a relationship with your mother at that
I
time,
did
or
not. I left my mom when I was 15 and was
Mm.
adopted.
Oh, wow.
And then I left them when I was 18. Um, and when I was 22 or 23, I write about this in Chaos and Color. My mom needed SSI. She couldn't work around people because she was so angry and abusive,
Mm.
um, and so that she could get money from the state for her mental illness, she needed SSI. So I agreed that I would go and get on the stand and tell this judge about what she did. And my mom, we had never talked about anything, nothing. Nobody ever got his counseling. Nobody ever
Mm.
got his services. Nobody ever did anything. They gave my mom Valium. That's what they did. Um, there was no help from the school system. Now CPS would step in. That did not
Right.
occur. And I was out of school 1 year for 89 days and nobody did anything. Um, so we never talked about anything. So when I get on the stand, she's in the courtroom and the judge is asking me all these questions and I have to go into all this. And she starts screaming in the courtroom
No.
to where the judge has to have her removed. And at first I was angry about it. And I thought, while I was sitting there, I just thought, he needs to see this.
Right.
And he stopped the whole thing and had a conversation with me. And at the time I was getting my PhD at TCU. He was a TCU alum. And he sent everybody out and he just sat there with me and he said, listen, I want you to know I'm not a fan of your mom's. And he said, but I'm a fan of yours. And
Mm.
he goes, I have no idea how what you're presenting right now is what I just heard on the stand. He goes, I don't know how you got here. He goes, but let me take the weekend. And he said, and let me look at this. And he did. He ended up giving her SSI. Um, so for like a month after that, or 2 months maybe, I tried to get her help. And she just wouldn't. And the mental health system wouldn't. And
Mm.
I just literally couldn't be around it.
Wow. Wow.
So I felt very guilty at times because I couldn't have her around her granddaughter. She never met her.
Yeah.
So all of that really, really pushed me to a place of you have to forgive, you have to help people, you cannot leave people behind. Um, so I won't tell the end of the book. That's for readers to read. But it. I will tell you a quote though that helped me more than anything. Anything. And it's an Eckhart Tolle quote, and it's at the end of my book. And it says, if your past were her past, your pain, her level of consciousness, your level of consciousness, you would think, act, and do exactly as she did. Herein lies peace, love, and forgiveness.
Mm. Wow.
And that was probably the most profound just quote. And it's so true. If I would have taken all the footsteps that she had taken since she had been on this planet, I would have done the exact same thing.
Mm. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Not until we walk in their shoes do we understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, when after, when I told my mom about what had happened when, I was an adult, but this was like 4 years ago. I told her what had happened and, she's like, okay, I'm going to leave him, but then she just couldn't, right? So I completely understood that she's never been really on her own, but there was a point where she was like, can you forget that it all happened so we can see our grandchildren?
Oh, wow.
And I was like, absolutely not. There's no way this is going to happen. And I just remember I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm hanging up the phone. I'm done with you. And I hung up the phone and I never talked to her. Well, I didn't talk to her for a while after that. And then I did my my MDMA assisted therapy session, and in that session, I felt this horrible feeling that I was losing my child. And my practitioner was like, "What's going on? You're wincing." And I remember being like, there's this feeling that I'm losing my daughter and I just don't want to feel it anymore. And she was like, "Well, what is that reminding you of?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is how my mom feels. She feels like she's losing me. So her only way to cope with this is if I was able to forget it happened and then we just move on." And I just remember thinking, I was like, this is a horrible feeling that I'm feeling. I do not like this feeling. And I really want it to go away. And then I completely understood why my mom said those words to me. Because at that time, I was like, how could you say this to me? But when I was in that moment, in that session, I was like, it all makes sense.
Yep.
It all makes sense. So it's you can't understand until you walk in someone else's
Yep.
shoes.
And I think you bring up a really good point that you and I kind of have touched on a bit. Just because you forgive someone that hurt you or abused you or does not then mean you don't then protect your own children.
Right.
It doesn't mean then you forgive so much that you forget the whole thing and put your kid in harm's way. I really was making sure that I was protecting my child. I did not want her to go through that or be around her. I would have never let her babysit her. I would have never, I just was not going to have her around that. But that doesn't preclude or negate forgiveness in any way. I can still
Mhm.
forgive her what she did, but then still protect my child.
Right.
Because I have
And
had people comment to me about that.
yeah, and I feel like, you know, you didn't outright say, "I forgive you" to your mother, did you? Or did I
I
miss
never
that?
had the chance to do that. Yeah.
So I feel like in that way, I feel like it is really for you and somewhat for them if they are able to feel that in some way if you're not communicating with that. But I think when people are like, "Oh, I have to forgive them," is they have to outright say, "I forgive you" to the person.
Mhm.
But that's
No, I
obviously
don't
not
think that. And I
necessary.
also don't think that I've had people, who was it? Rosie Perez, that actress,
Mhm.
was on a podcast or an interview one day. And it was sad to hear how much she still carries all the anger and pain at her age of what her mom did to her. And she's like, I cannot forgive. I will not forgive, blah, blah, blah. And, one of the comments she made in there was, I'm waiting for an apology.
Mm.
I didn't need an apology either. I
Right.
didn't need an apology to forgive. Um, I All I needed was to sit down and have an awareness of her childhood, what she went through, what that pain did to her, what that spilled over onto me, what all that means. I just think there needs to be some awareness, but I don't think that the act of you going up to them and saying, I forgive you, or them looking at you and saying, I'm sorry. I don't think you have to have necessarily, I mean, would those things be wonderful? Sure. But I don't necessarily think that you need to do that. And I think that there are many people that are sitting there going, well, I'm not going to forgive until I get an apology.
Mm,
Well, then you're going to live in this space possibly until the day you die. And
yeah.
I just am not going to do that to my life, to myself, to people around me, to my daughter, that I'm not going to just carry this trauma with me forever. I'm literally not going to do that. Waiting on an apology.
Yeah.
That none of that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, even then you're relinquishing your power because you're giving them the
Yes.
power. They're the ones if
Yes.
they do this, if they make
Yes.
their own decision, then I'll be feel better. That's just
Yes.
you're just
And I
giving up.
like how you put it that way. You put it way better than I did. You are relinquishing your power. You're putting them in control now, not only of the trauma, but you're putting them in control of your own healing. And
Yeah.
your healing is your responsibility.
Yeah.
It's your
Yeah.
practice, it's a daily practice, and it is your responsibility. And what a
Absolutely.
beautiful thing to show your child.
Yeah. Really is, right? I mean, after I told my mom confronted my dad, and my dad sent me he was calling me. I was like, I can't talk to him. And I never did after that. But then he sent me a text and said, I'm sorry. And and honestly, I don't even know if I needed that
Yeah, I probably
because
didn't.
I did, yeah, I really didn't. Like, I mean, I would have been really mad if he denied everything, but when he said he was sorry, it didn't make me feel any better. Worse.
Mhm.
I just felt like I think it was all up to me whether or not I needed to start my healing, whether I forgave him or I showed him whatever compassion that needed to be, you know.
What do you think about the adults around you when you were a kid and nobody knew and nobody helped and nobody.
I I had a lot of friends, and I think they had their own traumatic experiences with their own parents, but I had this one, my best friend, and her parents were social workers, and I feel like they always knew something was off with my dad, but they never really taught like said anything negative because I don't think they really knew.
Mhm,
Um because my dad hid it so well. Because they're all of my friends, like, all my friends either loved my dad or hated my dad,
mhm.
because
Oh,
my dad
wow, I
would
had the same thing. That's weird.
really yeah,
Uh-huh. That's
probably when
weird.
they were in their good place, they were
Uh-huh.
really
Yep,
great, but when they were in their bad place, it was like, "Okay, there's something very wrong
yep.
here."
Very true.
And so, yeah, it was, but I remember they always showed me what I should expect.
Mm,
Um, either, how they spoke to their children, and, I always remember thinking, like, that's the kind those are the parents that's the kind of parent I wanna be. I wanna
yeah.
be a parent that actually listens, and I think that kind of helped me. I was extremely suicidal for a very, very long time.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Mhm,
it's
mhm,
very true. When you go through all of it, it's just piles of stress and overwhelm, and so, yeah, when I feel like I was lucky enough to see them in my life and
mhm,
know what I wanted to do, or what I knew was normal and not normal. Because I could, for the longest time before I met my best friend, I thought this was normal. Like, I thought
mhm,
that all this, like, the yelling, and even I had a neighbor always, when I remember I was crying because my parents were yelling and hitting things around me. um and I remember my neighbor being like, "Why are you crying? They didn't even hit you." Like, I was like, "Not yet."
yeah.
And I just,
Right. Yeah.
so that was I was kind of in like an environment where that was a thing. It
Mhm.
wasn't, it was, people lived in very unhealthy homes.
I very, true. And I've been out in and out of so many people's homes because, people would take me in and my mom would leave me with strangers. And, so I've seen so many different families and so many different homes. And, as a child, and I wrote about the families that helped me and took me in, and um, very, very thankful for those adults who, like you said, showed me what a family was supposed to be like, show me what a mom was supposed to be. Um, I love now that I've gotten older and I realize that God really always replaces everything that you've lost in your life. So like I didn't, really have a mom, but now I have like three.
Mm.
Like, three moms that are still like my moms and still mom me and, still are amazing. And, I didn't really have my dad when I was young, but now my dad is back. And,
Oh,
I was
wow.
raised as an only child of my mom and lonely. And now I have like a ridiculous amount of siblings. Um, and so, but I do remember the adults around in my life that I thought, wow, you're not seeing what's happening. Like, you're not
Mm.
seeing what's going on. Like, y'all aren't going to do anything. Like, nobody's going to do
Wow.
anything with this lady. But,
Wow.
you get older and you realize people don't know how to help.
Right.
They don't know how to help. And they were scared of her. They didn't know what to do with her. And, and also she was lying. And, you
Yeah,
know, they don't know. You're dealing with somebody else's child, somebody else's life, somebody else's family. You have no idea what's going on.
exactly.
And that took me a bit to have compassion for those people as well and forgive them and realize, they didn't know. Everybody's doing the best they can do.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's so true. Well,
Mhm.
thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Um, yeah, one thing that you said, you brought up being suicidal over this. And
Mhm.
since this is a podcast for, trauma survivors, I do want, my third book is about suicide. And, since the pandemic, suicide has gone up in every age group, every gender, across the board, across all countries.
Mhm.
Um, and I just want to say, one of the things is suicidal ideations is a very human condition. So I've had many people ask me, oh, does this mean I'm mentally ill? Does this mean something's wrong? It doesn't. It's a very human condition. And really, all suicidal ideations mean is that not that you want your life to end, you just want the pain to end.
Mhm.
So, what I hope when you have that, that is an extreme indication that you have a lot to heal. There's a lot of pain there that you need to heal. So, I just really want to leave your audience with, start that process. Just start
Yeah,
it.
it's worth it. It
It's
really
worth
is.
it.
Oh, well, thank you. I so appreciate this conversation. I
Yeah, this
really
is
enjoyed
wonderful.
talking to you. I really could just talk to you without even being on a podcast. So I
Definitely.
do
Well, I hope
appreciate
you
it.
read my book, and I would love to hear
Yes.
from you after you read it.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I will check that out. I will check that out right after we get off. I cannot wait.
Wonderful. Well, stay in touch. It was great to meet you, and I'm so proud of you for all your healing.
And you too. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Layla Salek, author of Chaos in Color. For more information on Layla, please go to the show notes. November's issue of Authentic Insider is out. Check out Authentic Insider at traumasurvivorthriver.com and look for December's issue, day after Thanksgiving, and Dr. Layla will actually contribute a piece as well. Again, that's traumasurvivorthriver.com. Please go to the website, and you can also find past episodes of Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my email list to get Authentic Insider magazine in your inbox monthly. Join us next week when I speak with Cody Peterson when we discuss sobriety and spirituality. You've been listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. I'm Lori Lee Binstock. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Take care.